Isabel Alloway. I'm the current Community and Economic Development Director for the City of Hamtramck. And today we're going to do an overview and discuss the Economic Recovery Plan document, which has been created as a result of a grant that the city received from the U.S. Economic Development Administration. This grant, which we received around 2023, does a couple things for us. It first of all funds a member of my department that works on economic recovery issues specifically for a 3-year period, and it also paid for a economic planner and contractor to develop this document for us. And a lot of the work that went into the process was all about conversations with stakeholders and members of city administration, business owners in the community, not as full scale as our master plan, which is work that's done every 10 years. So I want to clarify, this doesn't replace the master plan in any way, which was last updated in 2020. But it does build on key recommendations from that plan and zeroes in specifically on economic development and economic recovery issues. I presented this to council on March 25th after giving it to them for review because, for transparency's sake, we want council and the community to understand what the basis is for my department, Community and Economic Development's work on economic recovery issues. This plan lays out a 10-year set of priorities for us. So on a bit different of a timeline, not exactly parallel to the master plan timeline, but has some really solid historical context, assessment of the state of economic recovery in Hamtramck, and also different action items that my department can take and work with stakeholders and other partners in the city to accomplish over the next 10 years. So I'm going to talk through this plan, and I'll start just acknowledging there's a lot of people on this page 2 slide that were involved in giving feedback to the contracted planner, who was Goal Track, and we are really appreciative of those efforts and conversations. So to go through this, we'll start with kind of the bird's eye view executive summary, work through the background, and then talk through the specific implementation strategies, which include 4 main focus areas on our commercial corridors, our downtown specifically, our industry and industrial development, and housing in the city of Hamtramck. So our goals with this plan are to find ways to revitalize the downtown core, enhance commercial corridors, create a supportive environment for industrial expansion and recruitment, and also generate better economic opportunities and quality of life for residents. And those are themes that you see in the master plan itself for sure. And these 4 focus areas are what this specific recovery plan just drill into a little bit deeper. I've talked about some of the context of this already, but one thing that makes this work really useful for my department is that there are separate 3-year working documents that we will have for our staff to reference, which do go into a bit more detail than this pretty document for public presentation that you see. So just know that this is kind of the bird's eye picture, and there are some more supplementary documents that have been developed as well. I mentioned that this supplements the master plan, and as a part of that goal track did an assessment of the elements of the master plan in 2020 that we still need to focus on, and scored them to provide us essentially a heavy hitters list of what would be the most helpful elements of the master plan to focus on to further economic recovery. So those were scored based on how much they increase economic development, increase city revenue, how easily they were accomplished by city staff, and how visible they are to residents, visitors, and the cost to voters and residents. So I'll talk about these different aspects of the master plan that were pulled after I go through the different implementation strategies of the plan. The plan starts by giving an overview of different statistics about the state of economic recovery in the city of Hamtramck, and then moves to talking about the implementation strategies here. So beginning with commercial corridors, we're really focused on, according to Gold Track, making a good first impression. So what does that mean? That could mean things like a banner implementation program, which has already begun along Joseph Campo, a signage program for businesses to be able to enhance their signage and redevelop it. Also, improving the gateways to the city and enhancing the facades of our businesses, as well as streetscape improvements. So this table provides some estimate costing about what that could look like to give city staff an idea of the funds required, likely through grant applications that we would need to pursue these initiatives. When we talk about a commercial corridor, these are really the main streets we're talking about: Carpenter, Caniff, Holbrook, Joseph Campo, and Conant. And at the end of this implementation strategy section on page 23, we have these high priority master plan update recommendations, which again take these sort of heavy hitter items from the master plan and give our staff an idea about how we could best prioritize to advance economic recovery. On page 24, you see the first of the plan's work plans. So in years 1 through 3 of the next 10 years, we've been already working towards piloting a banner program on Joseph Campo, like I mentioned. The plan advises that we work toward developing this citywide and change the banners out consistently and match them to different festivals. The citywide signage program would include elements like setting up the improvement guidelines for businesses, an application process for that, a different advertising program, and expanding that across different districts throughout the city in the next 5 or so years. Gateway and wayfinding signage is also a focus here. In the chart on page 28, you can see kind of the state of the different gateways that we have in our city. We have a lot, and one thing that we want to focus on through this plan's work is the feeling that you are in fact in the city of Hamtramck when you cross into its border, as opposed to not knowing whether you are in the city of Detroit or not. So we want visitors to Hamtramck to know that they are here and to be excited that they are here. And work plan in years 1 through 3 for a gateway initiative would include things like grant applications and identifying different funding sources with partners, designing those gateways, and engaging with the public about what we would like to see, as well as adopting the final design plans before moving into work plan years 4 through 6, where we would be identifying placement sites and working on fabrication and installation. We did previously have a storefront improvement program, which was funded in a limited fashion through the DDA based on grant funding that the DDA was able to receive. So this is really about restarting that program, which can be a really strong opportunity for businesses. So in the first few years here, we're looking at, again, establishing design guidelines, securing funding, marketing to our downtown businesses, and then expanding that program, essentially copying and pasting it throughout additional districts of the city in the next 4 to 6 years. Now when we look at our downtown implementation strategies, we've separated these out in this plan with GoldTrack's help, because having a strong downtown really is the engine and the lifeblood of development across the city as a whole. And when we think about our downtown, the classic kind of standard main street that we have spans from Holbrook to Kniff up Joseph Campo. And it's the most kind of pedestrian scaled, walkable, accessible business district. And so our recommendation from GoldTrack was that we really identify that specific part of our city as Hamtramck's downtown, and that we take on initiatives that will really strengthen that and allow it to be kind of the catalyst for a lot of these other commercial developments that we would love to see in the future. So GoldTrack's recommendation here was that we really double down on Hamtramck's international brand as a part of making this happen. That is our strength. We have a competitive edge against other downtowns in the Metro Detroit area, because we have the excitement of our strong immigrant community, our landmark businesses who have been in Hamtramck for a long time, but also we have the density and excitement that a lot of new expanding suburbs can only dream to have. They've spread out so much that now that density is the urban planning kind of best practice recommendation, they have to figure out a way to scale back in. So we have, at the risk of sounding cliche, really good bones, and we have an international brand and a very proud immigrant community that we can share with the rest of the Metro Detroit area and beyond. So when we look at our next 3 years, what GoldTrack has recommended we focus on is really to empower the DDA as much as possible to continue the night bazaar markets that we have already been launching. These markets are essentially pipeline type events that allow us to support small businesses that don't necessarily have a brick and mortar setup, but to help them expand into the Hamtramck market and get the word out about their business, and then ideally occupy a vacant storefront in our downtown or elsewhere in our city someday. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the entrepreneur support ecosystem that's talked about on page 36 also, and the pipeline of new retail businesses that we want to be able to support. Our gateways, our signage, our facade programs also will be an added benefit and a part of the downtown implementation strategy in years 1 through 3. Moving on here, just to talk a bit more about the DDA. Our DDA has a budget of approximately $30,000 per year currently, which is really the standard amount of funding that it takes to cover administrative costs generally of a DDA, meaning staffing or the bare minimum to cover the cost of printing agendas and having the bare minimum logistics, I suppose. So we get really creative to try to use that $30,000 as best we can, and as a part of my role, I oversee the functions of the DDA as well. We need to find more ways to fund the DDA because that is going to open the door for facade improvement programs, for signage improvement grants, and empowering the DDA is going to be really pivotal to doing those things and all these other special projects we're talking about. So the plan provides different ideas for how to fund the DDA in a more fulsome way, including TIF, tax increment financing, and business improvement district funding strategies. Page 40 starts talking about the night bazaar a little bit more. Again, this is a program that we have already started. So the main recommendation here from Gold Track is to incorporate more food products and produce into the bazaar. So that is something that people come back to shop regularly as a part of their routine, because there's only so many trinkets you can buy or gifts for folks. So to make the night bazaar more of a part of the routine for the community. And we can grow the night bazaar from there. We would like to continue to keep pairing it with the timing of different festivals, like our Labor Day Festival, the Neighborhood Arts Fest, and I think it's one of our strongest programs already, which we can really build on a lot of momentum. And that momentum creates the entrepreneur support ecosystem I was talking about as well. One really exciting partnership that is new to the city is with Prosperous. That is a economic development finance institution and small business coaching entity that provides workshops for small business owners and even TRIA compliant loan programs as well, which is something that our Muslim community really needs and our Muslim small business owner community really needs in order to get capital to further advance their growing businesses. So those would continue to be our focus in years 4 through 6, including exploring more partnerships with organizations like Invest Detroit to build on the work that Prosperous does. The next recommendation about our downtown is to adopt the Main Street approach. This is in reference to the Michigan Main Street program, which is affiliated with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. That's the statewide agency that oversees regional, local, and statewide development initiatives. And they help cities take on long-term revitalization in their downtowns, their core downtowns. And for us, that is Holbrook to Caniff typically. That would be what Michigan Main Street would consider our main street. Even though Joseph Campo, the entire stretch of that is our DDA. So this is a certification program that Gold Track is recommending we stay the course with. We are already involved with it. And CED is currently working on the next stage of our application to become a certified Main Street community. That opens up a lot of grant funds for facade improvements and signage grants for business owners. if we are successful. We just had a visit from Michigan Main Street to Hamtramck as a part of that application process, which is ongoing. So our level that we would hope to reach after we apply in the fall of 2025 is our select Michigan Main Street level. And a few years after that, we can become fully certified. So the next big recommendation here about our downtown focuses for economic recovery really focuses on embracing the international brand, then followed by creating a pipeline of new retail businesses, building on that momentum. And finally, what GoldTrack labels as bringing it all together in a festival marketplace. So we eventually could have placemaking elements that really capture the small business pop-ups through the bazaar and fully integrate those aspects of our small business pipeline into our festival events like the Labor Day Fest and others. In years 4 through 6 of that work plan, it talks about how a streetscape design could really enhance elements for pedestrian-friendly outdoor eating and walking and shopping in our downtown. And I don't know what that would look like. So the fact that it's listed in the plan doesn't mean that it's fully thought out, but it's a directive for us to imagine. So moving on to the third implementation strategy section for industry. We have to be very clear that industrial development is a long and drawn out process. We have actually a sizable percentage of all land in the city of Hamtramck, and our 2.2 square miles is zoned industrial. I would say somewhere between 30 and 40%. But it still is not a lot of land just in the number of acres. So we have to be really targeted and strategic about attracting industry to the space that we have that is available, and most of it is taken up, as we know, by General Motors and American Axle as of now. So this portion of the plan talks about priorities like understanding what our industrial property availability is and assembling a database for that, to enhance relationships with current industries and understanding what their needs are in a pretty standard business retention fashion, as well as strengthening marketing and development access and collaboration with the MEDC. That would also help us establish different brownfield authority and loan and grant programs. So an industrial property database in years 1 through 3 would require us to compare existing data with state level records that the MEDC already has available, to do a really thorough inventory of our public and privately held sites, to update specs about those sites in that inventory with information about who owns the property, how large it is, what utilities are already available on the site, how delivery vehicles can access it or not, what the road conditions are, what the approaches are like. And those are all pieces of information that businesses want to know and have at their fingertips if they're choosing to consider building in Hamtramck. And some of these properties are brownfield sites, meaning that they require some element of environmental cleanup. So we want to understand just how contaminated they are, and in some cases cities will proactively seek funds for these testing kits or visits from the county. and different third-party contractors that do that work to try to have that information ready to reduce the cost for different developers who are looking to, or who are shopping around for new sites to develop. Okay, so then our next section is really that business retention element I spoke about. So our work plan for this in years 1 through 3 includes visits personally, likely by the director of the Community and Economic Development Department, to understand the current state of their business and their concerns, to understand different industry needs, challenges, and how we can collaborate on solutions moving forward. And then in years 4 through 6, we would create a rapid response team to address those urgent needs or different utility problems, perhaps water pressure or other concerns that might be blocking businesses from developing in Hamtramck at an industrial level. And then when we talk about MEDC programs, we have a lot of state level tools like the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, as well as different training sessions that we would engage in work plan years 1 through 3. And then in 4 through 6, we would want to double down on our collaboration with the MEDC to do those site assessments and cleanups and develop our log of resources and specs for individual properties. That is the same for our brownfield loan and grant criteria program. In order to do that, we really do need a brownfield redevelopment authority, which would be a separate entity similar to a board or commission at the city level, which would take some administrative work to set up in years 1 through 3, followed by a pretty aggressive search for funding from the state or the county level in years 4 through 6. The recommendations for the fulsome industrial redevelopment and retention and recruitment strategy really pushes us to be proactive instead of reactive. So in years 1 through 3, we would be assessing our industrial inventory for trends and opportunities. What businesses do we want to attract? How could we strategically pursue funding to prepare sites to attract certain types of businesses? And then in years 4 through 6, present council with a formal strategy, and that would include incentives like tax abatements, infrastructure improvements, and perhaps some expedited permitting processes as well. And continue to update our marketing and digital presence and that recruitment of businesses as we get response from private industry and understand trends in the market and who is interested in building in Hamtramck. And throughout that entire process, our partnerships with Wayne County and organizations like the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation would be really helpful. So our last point here involves establishing regular meetings with the county and DEGC in years 1 through 3, as well as identifying projects where we could collaborate, in addition to just being more of a presence in regional economic development initiatives. And then in 4 through 6, those years we would be able to better identify target industries for the city to attract, as well as how to highlight our strengths, what available workforce we have in our vicinity, and how we fit into the economic trends of the region. So moving into the last housing implementation strategy section, we are a very dense community, as we know. So housing is a continual topic for us, and how to provide more housing for growing immigrant families especially, and how to do that in a safe, efficient, effective way that still delivers quality services to our residents is a high priority for the city. So GoldTrack recommends that we make the most use of the city-owned lots that are vacant as possible. We've been undergoing an auction in this month, actually, March of 2025. So at the conclusion of that auction, our work plan from GoldTrack recommends that we evaluate the lots that are left and then dispose of the remaining lots somehow to try to get them to hands in the in the private sector that would really be developing the type of housing that the city needs, which tends to be multi-unit on a residential lot with appropriate amenities for multiple families, sometimes all within one house. So then in work plan years 4 through 6, we would still be seeking to find developers for any properties that the city comes into ownership of, either from the county land banks or the foreclosure process. Our second point here, talking about housing on page 66, is to encourage infill housing on vacant lots. So in our years 1 through 3, we would be focusing on enforcing the development agreements that we have entered into with people who purchased vacant properties from the city through our residential lot sale program. We would also consider expediting permitting for different vacant lot developments in some way in partnership with the building department, as well as examining our zoning ordinances to look at how to, I like to say, encourage responsible density. Our third pillar in our housing recommendations talks about creating incentives for upper story housing in commercial areas. So we have a lot of commercial properties on Joseph Campo and Conant especially that have a first floor commercial use and an empty second floor that could be used again for housing. So we would want to evaluate opportunities to create that housing in years 1 through 3 of the work plan. Then we would identify resources that could help developers achieve that. So whether that is grant funding or work through the neighborhood enterprise zones that are being enacted throughout the city for tax abatements, that would open up in years 4 through 6 to try to do something similar to perhaps an underutilized back portion of a commercial property with a retail or commercial space on the first floor. And we would be similarly looking for resources to help developers with that. The fourth pillar of the housing recommendations are to improve rental housing code enforcement, and I will acknowledge this is something that already is in play for sure with our code enforcement department that is trying to make sure that a larger share of the rental properties in the city are meeting rental inspection requirements and being certified registered rentals. We want to be able to improve the condition of our rental housing stock in Hamtramck. So we could seek grant funding for different repair or financing opportunities for these landowners. And then in work plan years 4 through 6, GoldTrack recommends that we create a program of appointment-based inspections to identify code violations and improve information about possible funding or financing assistance. So that would really kind of bring together CED and the building department's work in more of a proactive approach to engaging with landlords. Then we move to different affordable housing development resources. Typically, the Hamtramck Housing Commission has taken charge of what I would say the main momentum behind low-income housing in the city. And I think that there are a lot more opportunities for affordable housing programs and those developments available from the state of Michigan. So this work plan years 1 through 3 recommendation for us, I think, is a strong one, and we would also want to evaluate opportunities to strengthen development proposals with affordable housing components in them. So for example, if I have a developer who's coming to have a conversation about building apartments with a portion of them that are Section 8 housing, how can the city be best equipped to receive that developer and make sure that we're supporting that need for low-income housing in Hamtramck. And there are certainly ways that we can do that by seeking funding again, and grants are a common theme as well, and a lot of this work happens at the federal level. So a combination of state and federal grants as we pursue these affordable housing development resources will certainly be a factor. Okay, so this reaches the end of the plan, and as we went through, you can see that a lot of the recommendations take a bird's eye view approach to these 4 different elements of economic recovery for us in our commercial corridors, our downtown, our industry, and our housing. It is a bird's eye view, but it does give us a direction moving forward for how the Community and Economic Development Department is going to approach these issues and prioritize what we work on other departments in the city with over the next 10 years. Thank you.